So, welcome to the Deep Dive into Death, episode 2. And I'm your host, Malia Bajic. And you can find me over here at findingrealm.com. I don't have all my death education stuff and death doula stuff on my website just yet. It's a bit of my old massage stuff. Where I'm just in the process of revamping that. But you can find me through info at findingrealm.com if you're interested in death education, grief support, death planning, advanced care planning, ritual ceremony, legacy, and vigil. Once again, email me at findingrealm.com. And if you're on Vancouver Island, mid Vancouver Island, we can meet in person. If not, I do virtual services. And sorry for the StreamYard logo right up at the top. As I'm learning this platform and deciding if this is what I'm going to use, then I'll invest in the higher quality version of this that will have all my stuff in there. And of course, you can like, share, and subscribe and find me on Twitter/X at Finding Realm, YouTube at Finding Realm, and Rumble. For some reason, I can't get my Finding Realm there. So it's just under my last name, Bajic. So you're going to have to start learning some Croatian. My grandpa added the J. So, long story short, in the meantime, that's where that is at. You will be able to find a little bit of my stuff on Facebook, but my daily postings are going to be on Twitter/X, just so I don't have to deal with the censorship. Because I'm not going to censor people or myself when we're talking about death or when we move into what grief support can look like later on in the show. So today's show, we are going to talk about the differences between palliative care, hospice, and what it means to die at home. So I'll get back into those slides in just a minute. But I just want people to know that all across Canada, some of the terminology is not the same. What we say in BC might be something totally different than what's in Ontario. And because I work across Canada, sometimes I'll use this language interchangeably. And of course, if you're watching from the States or anywhere else in the world. So this information that I'm providing you is just a generalized terms for you to start understanding what the process could be or could look like within your own community. So palliative care. Once you have a serious long-term illness, regardless of your stage that you're in, then you can start receiving palliative care. When you're taking palliative or receiving palliative care, you are still taking curative measures and treatments to stay alive. So, for example, if you have cancer, you might still be taking chemo. Palliative care helps with symptom relief, pain management. They can also help with important medical decisions, emotional and spiritual and financial decisions. Usually in palliative care at that point, they're directing you to your social worker, maybe an occupational therapist. There's a team of people that can help you out. There are doctors and nurses that specialize in palliative care. Plus, you also have your primary doctor, your pharmacist, your social worker, counselor, your death doula, spiritual advisors. I could be missing a few, but that's the main ones anyways. And we all, or everybody I just spoke about, helps assist you in coordinating your care. So palliative care can be done inside hospitals, sometimes in an outpatient clinic or at your home. And depending on where you are in the world, insurance is based on your own policy. So I'm not really going to ever get into that part in the death education, but just so you know. Yeah, I think that's a good general. Now, hospice. So hospice is anyone with a terminal illness, predominantly, but this is not always the case, but 6 months or less to live. And this is the big one, you no longer are taking a treatment to stay alive. So you've said no to therapies, go way beyond. And often once hospice kicks in, there will come a point where maybe you just actually stop taking even some of your regular medications. So symptom relief and pain management are still on the top of the list of what we can do for you. We help make important life decisions at the end of life. We help support emotionally, spiritually, financially by giving you assistance in helping somebody help coordinate your care. You still have your doctors, your nurses that specialize in hospice care, healthcare workers, pharmacists, social workers, counselors, death doulas, spiritual advisors. Hospice can be in hospitals, hospices, long care facilities, assisted living, and your home. The important thing to remember about hospice is that depending on where you live or how many beds there are in your community, I don't really want to say it quite this way, but you could be on a wait list to get in because you have to have somebody else to die before you can go. Like at our community, in one of our hospices, there's 7 beds. So even though you may have less than 6 months to live, you might not get into your hospice till a week before you die. So the important part about being a death doula is helping actually with making these kinds of decisions and bringing this type of awareness to people so they know what to expect. Because a lot of the trauma and the drama that kicks in is the space in between while we're waiting for the medical system to give the information that we need. And there, I know in Canada, and I can assume in the rest of the world, are often overrun and super busy, and yeah, there's a lot of waiting involved. This is where the death doula becomes really important to have. Even when my stepdad was dying and we were in the hospital, he was there for a month. We still waited 2 weeks. I think it was 2 weeks, like pretty darn close to the day or like that, Well, we're surrounded by the healthcare system until we really had gotten any information. So sometimes, and I don't mean any disrespect to anybody that's working in the hospitals or palliative care or hospices, but this is the point of this show is to help inform people so that we can start making decisions and not be stuck in that waiting space, because I think that's what drives most people nuts, or a large chunk of it anyways. So palliative care and hospice at home. So when you choose to have a home death, you will still get all the medical and palliative and hospice services. The doctors, nurses, and your support team will still come to your house. They will help you with your brief changes, bathing, etc., of some of the things that you may need to put into place. A thought to be aware of is it doesn't happen like this. So by knowing this kind of information, it's really important because then you can start preparing. I'd like a home death. These are the things that I'm going to need to put in place. And just depending on what your needs are, the equipment will also be brought in. So maybe you need a lift or a wheelchair or hospice in our area, they'll bring you all kinds of things, even your briefs and sheets. And, there's each one, like I say, may be totally different, but there is this level. Once hospice or palliative care kicks in, and I believe this is all across Canada, but I know BC for sure, there's a lot of medications and stuff that are actually covered, and you don't have to pay for a chunk of your prescriptions, equipment coming in, even things like your briefs. But once again, this is something that you want to check according to your province. And I have no idea what that means in the States. So palliative care, you still get the benefits. The one benefit I know in BC, I was told I got, but I'm still getting the bill, is the ambulance. So the ambulance in BC, I don't know what the other provinces are, is not included in your palliative care services. But when my father-in-law was dying, the ambulance became our best friend. So we ended up having a lot of ambulance bills. He liked them. He liked the ambulance better than the doctors, the hospitals, everything. So we would phone the ambulance to make sure I was doing a good job. So all good. In BC, and once again, going all across Canada, we have what's called the EDITH form, expected death in the home. This form is like the most important thing we can have. They will not give it to you unless you are at a hospice level. And I'm not exactly sure if it's 6 months or less because the doctors will vary. But you literally have to tell your doctor you'd like to die at home, be nearing your death, or your family member nearing their death, and then they will sign the form for you. It gets placed on your fridge or in a baggie in your freezer, wherever you'll have stuff like your DNR or your MOST forms. We'll get into that stuff in another show. And what this form does is it tells us that, yes, you are choosing to die at home, and that if you choose to die at home, we do not, as a family member or a support worker or a death doula, we will not have to call the coroner to investigate your death, and I'm just going to say it to make sure that it isn't a murder. And I know people don't like, oh, Malia, you said it like that. But the thing is there are all people are, very unique in all their ways. And depending on certain circumstances, we just want all of our legal liabilities to be in place. Because even though, you might think that somebody might not do this or that, when death and grief are in somebody's field, people act like idiots. I'll just say it like that, right? So you want to make sure that you are protected and that we know that there is going to be an expected death in the home. So the other thing that's really important from my own experiences of having a lot of death in my life amongst family members and friends, and as this stepping into this profession this way, is that communicating that you want a home death is really important. And knowing that we can bring in systems of support to help relieve family members or friends that may be caring for you. And so that people can understand this, because not everybody's comfortable with death. Not everybody might be comfortable changing a brief or like being at the bedside with somebody who's dying. So communicating your needs that you'd like to have a home death to your family members, and the people that aren't comfortable with it then now know, you know what, I've got a team of support that can come in. So you can just come and be with me at what's most comfortable for you. And also another thing that is in Canada, varies province to province, but we have what's called a compassionate care leave. So there's rules according to the Employment Standard Act, provincially based, and you would have to be somebody that pays your taxes, pays into like your CPP and employment and EI to receive this. So if you're self-employed, this isn't going to happen, but you can have 26 weeks of paid leave in order to support one of your family members if you are experiencing a death. Once again, this is provincially based, and depending on what you pay into will be whether you can actually receive the money or not. So that's our brief little introduction to palliative care, hospice, and what it might start looking to have a death at home. Of course, because I'm a death doula, I help support people in giving them the education in order to have their death at home. In Canada, 83% of Canadians will not receive an equitable or fair death. 17% of Canadians are within the system. So, it's super devastating, to be honest with you, in understanding that. when I found out, that actually made me cry. And then having the death of both of my stepdad and both of my in-laws, I really got to witness what that space in between looks like, especially with my father-in-law, because it was me and him, literally me and him while he was dying. I was reading the Bible. I was skipping verses. Sorry for all the Christians and Catholics out there, because I just thought, oh my, you were never a great Christian anyways, Darwin, and according to one level. And some of the stuff I just wasn't going to say. I just wanted it to be super peaceful for him that way. And it was just a lot of violence and war. Anyways. Yeah, that was interesting. That was super interesting. Although, to be honest with you, in my ritual planning, I'm willing to help support anybody in whatever belief system that they're at and meet them where they're at. I just knew by the look on his face and what he was experiencing that was okay. It was. But I will say I went through that New Testament and this made me think about a lot of things. And because we are in the deep dive into death, and it's not just going to be based, the show, on what the medical world looks like in hospice or palliative care or dying, but bringing in the curiosity of death, I thought that this was really interesting, because the death of a star brings the birth of a cell, and what is death? We have been in such a death phobic society, and I guess kind of tying into what I just said, what we've been taught in all of our religions, and I'm not saying they're right or wrong. I personally studied Buddhism for quite a long time, for 8 years. I still, if you see my altar, one day I'll show you guys it. It's still super heavily Buddhist, because there's a large part of me that still has that within me. But what I started recognizing at the time of death, and maybe reading some of these things, that I don't know, this is just me and my show and the deep dive into death, that perhaps some of these teachings are what are actually trapping people into the system. The matrix is what I mean by the system. So I don't know, that might be a little bit bold to start with on my show, but I'm just going to be myself, and you're either going to like it or you're not. So thank you very much for the second episode of the deep dive into death, and I look forward to seeing you again.